Poor girl crashed into the millionaire CEO's car. What he did next changed her life forever. It wasn't the frosting that ruined the day. It was the silence that followed the crash. The kind of silence that wraps around you when the world reminds you just how small you are. She didn't mean to hit his car, and he didn't mean to pause. But in that one moment, the girl with nothing and the man with everything locked eyes over a ruined hood, and something quietly, impossibly, get the change, because not every accident breaks you. Some are just fake, disguised as a mess worth cleaning up. Together, it's edible. Alice beamed. That's practically a Michelin star coming from you. He didn't blink. Same time tomorrow. And so it began. Each day she showed up, sometimes early, sometimes with smudged eyeliner and jokes he never laughed at out loud. Each day he took the tray, barely said a word, but always ate every crumb. On Wednesday she added a note. May contain traces of humor. Alert us of any allergies. On Thursday he returned the cup with a sticky note. No side effects. Proceed. By Friday she was tired. Grandma had a fall. Her sister was fighting with her boyfriend, and the neighbor's cat threw up in her oven. She delivered the order with a sigh. Survival kit. 1 mocha, croissants, 1 muffin, and a very tired delivery person. Thomas looked at her. For a long time, then, quietly, he said, "You look disorganized. And you look like the villain in a courtroom drama." Their eyes met, and for the first time something passed between them that had nothing to do with frosting, money, or timing. A kind of recognition. On her way out, she whispered half to herself, "Alice, you just traded your dignity for a dented Jaguar and a gluten-free muffin." But something inside her, something stubborn and warm, answered back. Maybe, just maybe, he was trading it for something else. Something she couldn't name yet. But it felt like the beginning of a story. One she never meant to write, but might just want to finish. Not the loud kind. No screeching brakes or crumpled metal. Just a soft, unexpected collision. Rubber wheels against chrome. A frosting-smeared cart tipping forward. Cupcakes somersaulting through the air like confetti in slow motion. And the silence that followed, that was the loudest part. Alice Olivia stood frozen on the sidewalk, a frosting-splattered napkin clutched in one hand, a runaway cupcake at her feet. Her entire livelihood lay toppled on its side like a wounded animal, and parked in front of her, gleaming like a trophy, was a black Jaguar with a fresh dent in its front bumper. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, pressed suit, cufflinks that caught the light like tiny knives. His eyes, ice blue and unreadable, fell on the frosting trail across his hood. His jaw tensed, not in shock, but in calculation. "You hit my car," he said, each word a full stop. Alice's voice caught in her throat. Then, somehow, it found a way out. Technically, it was my cupcake cart. And technically, it was the wind. And gravity. And maybe the sidewalk for being... A beat of silence. "That's a Jaguar," he said, pointing like it was a sacred monument. He nodded. "I know, I Googled it once." He reached for his phone. "Oh God," he burst out, stepping in front of him like she was auditioning for a low-budget superhero film. "Please don't call the police. I have a better idea." His hand froze. "You have 5 seconds. I'll pay you back, with cupcakes." His face barely moved, but his eyes narrowed. "Cupcakes?" "Yes. And coffee. I run a sweets cart. Really, it's an experience. Edible emotions. One lady canceled her divorce after my brownie. Another said my mocha cured her Monday." He looked at her like she was a strange painting hung in the wrong gallery. "You want to repay thousands in damage with frosty and caramel drizzle, if you like your apologies with flair." A pause. The kind that stretches just long enough to make you hope. Then, without a word, he looked back at the car, then at her. 7:30 tomorrow, Fisher Corp headquarters. Double mocha, 2 croissants, and a gluten-free muffin. Personally delivered. On time. Alice blinked. "Is that a yes?" "That's a deal," he said, "but if you're late..." She scribbled the order on a frosting-stained napkin, nodded like she'd just signed a treaty, and whispered, "Do you want the muffin with fruit or with regrets?" He didn't answer, but as he got back in the car, a smile flickered, so small it could have been mistaken for a flinch. And just like that, the girl who had nothing but recipes and resilience made a deal with the grumpiest man on Wall Street. The next morning, Alice's alarm blared the Mission Impossible theme song, her sister's idea. She tripped over a cat that didn't belong to her, spilled coffee on her apron and burned her croissant dough twice. But by some miracle she made it. 32 floors up, under the gaze of suspicious receptionists and a security guard who looked like he moonlighted as a bouncer, she stepped into the glass lair of Thomas Fischer, CEO, perfectionist, emotionally unavailable. "You're late," he said. "It's 7:31. Still 7:30 in most zip codes." He placed the coffee, croissants, and muffin on his desk with all the ceremony of a waitress serving royalty. He took a bite, chewed, swallowed. Chapter 1: Cupcakes and Car Insurance. The next morning the sky over Manhattan wore its usual gray expression, and so did the guard at the Fisher Court front desk. Alice Oliva stood there, balancing a thermos carrier, a pastry box, and nerves that had been unraveling since dawn. "Name?" the security guard asked flatly, his shoulders broad enough to make the lobby feel like a choke point. "Alice Oliva," she replied, straightening her floral apron like it was armor. "I have a breakfast delivery for Mr. Thomas Fischer." He raised one skeptical eyebrow. "You sure you're in the right building?" She smiled brightly. "If this is the building that houses terrifying CEOs with an unfortunate sense of humor and a damaged Jaguar, then yes, this is the place." He stared at her like he was deciding whether to laugh or press a silent alarm. "I'm expected," she added quickly, producing a frosting-smudged napkin with the order scribbled in pink ink. 7:30 a.m. Double mocha. 2 croissants. Gluten-free muffin. The guard sighed, picked up the phone and dialed an extension. "She's here. With a cart. And a smell, yeah. He hung up. 32nd floor. Don't touch anything." "Not even the elevator buttons?" she asked innocently. He didn't answer. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, and Alice stepped in. Her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, wide-eyed, still sleepy, apron slightly askew, hair tied back with a ribbon that used to belong to her mom. He whispered under her breath, "You're not just delivering pastries, you're delivering dignity. Frosted dignity." The 32nd floor was a different world. Quiet, air-conditioned in a way that felt expensive. The walls were lined with glass, the floor so polished she could see the outline of her sneakers in it. And at the center of it all, a reception desk so sleek it looked like it had been designed by NASA. Behind it sat a woman who could have been carved from marble, blazer sharp enough to slice bread, lipstick as unforgiving as her expression. Alice cleared her throat. "Hi, Alice." The receptionist didn't even look up, just nodded slightly toward the frosted glass door nearby. Taking a deep breath, Alice nudged it open with her shoulder and stepped into the lion's den. Thomas Fischer sat at his desk, backlit by the city skyline like a villain in a noir film. He didn't look up, not until she set the tray down with a flourish. "Double mocha," she announced. "Made with love and anxiety. 2 croissants, 1 crunchy, 1 not, and a gluten-free muffin that cost me 3 failed attempts and a small piece of my soul." He looked up at that. Finally, his eyes scanned the tray, then her face, then her apron, which had a suspicious new coffee stain. "You're late," he said. Alice checked her watch. "It's 7:31, which, depending on your time zone, is still 7:30. He didn't smile. Of course he didn't. But he did pick up the coffee and take a sip. He waited, holding her brew, watching his expression for any sign of emotion, anything at all. He set the cup down. "It's edible." "That was almost a compliment," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Should I notify the press?" He ignored her. Instead, he opened his laptop, glanced at something on the screen, and said, "Same time tomorrow." Alice blinked. "Wait, seriously? You made a deal. I expect consistency." She hesitated, confused. "So, this is real? I bring breakfast, and you don't charge me for the car?" "You bring breakfast, on time every weekday, For the next 3 weeks. That should about cover the paint work. 3 weeks. She bit back the sarcasm clawing its way up her throat. Instead, she nodded slowly. Got it. 3 weeks of edible emotions, and if I'm late, call the police, or worse, my legal team. He gave a tight smile. How lucky for me that I make an excellent muffin. As she turned to go, her elbow clipped a nearby sculpture, some modern art piece that looked like 2 silver chopsticks wrestling over a napkin. She caught it just before it toppled. Please don't sue me for that, she muttered. He didn't reply. He was already back to typing. But as the door clicked shut behind her, Thomas Fischer let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. And on the elevator ride down, Alice did the same. Back on the street, the city resumed its chaotic rhythm. Cars honking, people shouting into phones, a dog barking at nothing. Alice stood for a moment at the corner, holding her now empty tray. She looked up at the tower she'd just left. 32 floors of power and polished shoes, and people who never spilled coffee on themselves. She had 3 weeks to prove she could exist in that world. Maybe not as one of them, but at least as someone they noticed. A gust of wind tugged at her apron as she turned back toward her cupcake cart. Her phone buzzed, a text from her grandmother. You left the kitchen a mess, but your mocha is still magic. Come home soon. Alice smiled. She tapped out a quick reply with frost-obscured thumbs. On my way, will explain everything, might involve muffins and a hostile billionaire. And as she pushed her cart across the crosswalk, humming under her breath, she felt it again. That strange pull in her chest. Like something had started, something small, sweet, sharp, and entirely unplanned. Chapter 2, Operation Caffeinated CEO. Alice Oliva woke up feeling like she'd missed a flight. Only the flight was a double mocha, 2 croissants, and a gluten-free muffin headed for the world's grumpiest billionaire. And she was the only person cleared for takeoff. Her alarm was still playing the Mission Impossible theme when her foot caught on the neighbor's cat. Again, it yowled and leapt out the window, leaving Alice in a heap beside her sneakers and apron. Great start, she muttered, rubbing her elbow. Gravity, cats, and caffeine withdrawal. We meet again. From the kitchen, her grandmother's voice echoed over the old jazz station, humming on the radio. Don't forget the extra sugar in the mocha. Some people got bitterness built into their bones. Copy that, Grandma. Alice called back. We're going full diplomacy today. Caramel drizzle and all. He tossed her ingredients into motion. Flour, butter, almond milk, a touch of cinnamon. Her apartment smelled like hope and exhaustion by the time the sun peeked over the Queen's skyline. As she wrapped the croissants in paper and packed the thermal tray, she whispered her new morning mantra like a spell. Double mocha, 2 croissants, gluten-free muffin. Don't be late. Don't trip, don't die. By the time she made it to the Fisher Corp lobby, she was sweating, half-winded, and trailing the scent of vanilla and apology. Live a girl again, the security guard grumbled without looking up. Today I come in peace. And pastries, Alice quipped. Please lower your shields. He buzzed through with a grunt. As the elevator carried her skyward, like a clumsy Cinderella with a coffee cart instead of glass slippers, Alice tried not to panic, or sweat through her apron. When the doors opened, the receptionist, whom Alice had nicknamed Miss Glacier, gave her a brief nod without breaking eye contact with her screen. I brought the edible emotional compensation, Alice said cheerily, and I wore deodorant. We're off to a great start. No response. Alice walked through the glass door, balancing the tray like it held state secrets. Thomas Fischer didn't look up. Of course. He was typing something with ruthless precision, his sleeves rolled up just enough to suggest he didn't need to try. She placed the tray down. Double mocha, made with high-end gilt beans, 2 croissants crisped within an inch of their lives, and 1 gluten-free muffin baked with hope. He glanced at the tray, then at her. You're earning. By 48 seconds to get emotional about it. Damo took a sip, his brow furrowed slightly. Was that approval? He reached for a croissant, bit in, chewed thoughtfully. Alice waited, her hands behind her back like a nervous student waiting on a grade. It's less burnt than yesterday, he said flatly. Thank you, she said brightly. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me since I was told I don't look allergic to success. A pause, then he reached for the muffin. Alice held her breath. He didn't comment, just took a bite, then turned back to his screen. You'll bring the same tomorrow. Unless I'm abducted by aliens or hit by a rogue bagel truck. Silence, then she turned to go. He walked straight into a decorative vase. It wobbled again. Aluka looked up, just in time to see Alice grab it with both hands, arms outstretched like she'd just caught a baby mid-fall. No need to thank me, she gasped. Saving CEOs from floral disasters is part of the cupcake package. His lips twitched. A tiny flicker, not a smile, but something close. Back in the elevator, Alice leaned against the wall, exhaling like she'd run a marathon in heels. Well, Alice, she muttered, day 2 and no lawsuits yet. That's growth. That night back at home, Alice stirred soup on the stove while her grandmother peeled potatoes. He ate the muffin sans Sedalia. Grandma Marlene raised an eyebrow, with joy. No, with a face like someone reading their own funeral invitation. But he ate it, and he didn't fire me, or call the police. Marlene chuckled. Sounds like love. Alice grinned. It's more like hostage negotiations with butter. The next day, Thomas was waiting when she walked in. He didn't say anything, just looked at the clock, then her. It's 7:29, she pointed out, holding up her phone, and this muffin has a note. Warning, may contain traces of sarcasm. He took the muffin. But he peeled the note and stuck it on his monitor. Alice blinked. Is that acceptance? Are we emotionally evolving? He looked at her. Less talk, more delivery. But later, when she returned to pick up the tray, there was a sticky note on the coffee cup. New side effects, you may proceed. Alice stared at it for a long moment, then whispered to herself, oh no, bonding with a capitalist. By Friday her smile was real, but her eyes were tired. He'd been up all night helping her sister Camila through a breakup. Grandma had gotten dizzy again, the coffee grinder broke, and the neighbor's cat vomited in her shoes. Still, she arrived at 7:28 with a tray full of effort and a smile full of caffeine. Here's your survival kit, she said, placing the items down. Comes with coffee, croissants, a gluten-free muffin, and the emotional wreckage of the delivery girl. Thomas looked up slowly. His gaze lingered on her tired eyes, her fraying apron, the slightly tilted muffin. You look disorganized, and you look like the villain in a courtroom drama. We make a good team. A long pause. He picked up the muffin and took a bite. Alice noticed a small photo on his desk. A little boy with blonde... Your son, she asked softly. He glanced at it. Nephew, lives in Seattle with my sister. He was cute, looks like the kind of kid who'd eat frosting for breakfast and call it a meal. Thomas looked at her, his eyes softening just slightly. You talk too much. And you don't talk enough, she smiled. Balance. He said nothing, but for the first time he didn't look away. Later, as Alice waited for the elevator, Becky, the sharp-ubbed assistant, walked past and said, They talked about you. Alice blinked. Excuse me? Becky smirked. He said, and I quote, she's dramatic. She leaves notes on muffins. But she's reliable. That's practically a love letter in CEO language, Alice muttered. He nodded. Good luck. He's hard to figure out. Like a puzzle made of blank pieces. Alice stepped into the elevator and whispered to herself, Yeah, but maybe I'll learn at the edge. Chapter through frosty notes and unspoken laughter. By the second week, it was no longer a transaction. 7:20 AALL stepped into the Fisher Corp lobby. 7:31 AM Thomas took his first sip of coffee, without saying thank you. 7:32 AM Alice tried and usually failed to get him to crack a smile. Every morning was the same, and yet somehow every morning felt different. One day she brought a cappuccino with a cinnamon heart on top. He raised an eyebrow. I thought we agreed on mocha. We didn't agree, she replied, You dictated, I innovated. Another morning she left a sticky note beneath the muffin. Caution, contains ambition and possibly walnut. He read it, didn't react, but didn't throw it away either. It ended up tucked into the back of his planner. She saw it there later. That week she began experimenting with muffin messages. Day 3, gluten-free, sarcasm rich. Day 4, baked at 5 a.m., with a little fear and a lot of cinnamon. Day 5, Macon's unexpected feelings, consume with caution. He never commented, but one afternoon she returned to retrieve the tray and found a reply written on the empty coffee cup. No feelings yet, but the croissant gave me something close to regret. Proceed. Alice nearly skipped down the hallway. The elevator became her second stage, a place to rehearse one-liners and exhale the nerves that only seemed to build, not fade. And she didn't understand it. Man, this fortress in a suit, but he did. Not because he was handsome or rich, but because beneath the silence he listened, he noticed, and when he responded it felt like an invitation, even if it was scribbled in pen on the back of a napkin. One rainy Wednesday Alice walked in drenched and disheveled. Her umbrella had snapped in half, her apron was soaked, and one croissant had died valiantly in the flood. Your breakfast may be emotionally compromised, she said, dropping the tray onto his desk. Thomas looked up. His eyes paused on the dripping edge of her sleeve, the strands of hair plastered to her cheek. You look... He stopped. Alice tilted her head. Please finish that sentence. I haven't had a man insult me before 8 a.m. all week. Like someone who needs a towel. He blinked. That's weirdly Are you coming down with something? He stood, walked to the small cabinet near the window and retrieved a clean hand towel. Folded, monogrammed, of course. He handed it to her without ceremony. Thanks, she muttered, drying her face and hands. For a guy who wears $4,000 0-cent shoes, you've got shockingly decent instincts. He didn't reply, but as she turned to leave he said softly, Next time bring an umbrella. That wasn't CEO speak, that was concern. He turned, but he was already back to his screen. That night Camilla called. But how is the rich robot? Alice was lying on the couch with her feet up, Grandma snoring softly in the next room. He's less robot now, she admitted. Camilla gasped. You like him? Going. You do, you're defensive. That's your tells lies voice. He likes a muffin notes, not the man. I bet his cheekbones don't come with warning labels. Camilla. Her sister laughed, and for a moment everything felt. Thursday morning Alice added a new element to the muffin handle quote. He placed the baked goods down, then slid a folded note beside the coffee cup. Thomas looked at it. Life's too short for bad coffee and unread messages. Alice. He read it, raised one brow, then without a word pulled out a pen and scribbled beneath it. Message received. Coffee possible. Muffin acceptable. She grinned. We're practically pinballs now. No, we're not, he said. But he couldn't throw the note away. Friday came like a sigh. Alice had been up until 2 a.m. baking, planning, worrying about rent and invoices, and the fact that her shoes had officially died mid-crosswalk. When she arrived, Becky stopped her at the reception desk. He was asking if you were late, Becky said casually. Alice blinked. Wait, he noticed. Becky smirked. He notices everything. Doesn't mean he shows it. In the office, Thomas didn't comment on the 5 minutes she was late. He didn't mention the smear of flour on her cheek either. But he did glance at her fingers, bandaged from burning herself on the oven tray. He said nothing, but when she returned to collect the tray, she found something next to the empty muffin wrapper. A packet of medical cream and a small note. Time heals most things. For the rest, use this. She stared at it for a long time. That night she placed the packet in her drawer, not for use, but to remember, because in a world where people barely saw her. He had noticed her hands. Chapter 4. Public shame, private rescue. It was a Friday night, and Rosie Olivant was standing on a sidewalk she didn't belong on. The air outside the upscale Manhattan restaurant was thick with perfume, wealth, and the quiet assumption that people like her didn't get to take up space. She clutched the drink tray in both hands, apron cinched tight over her jeans, face flushed from sprinting 3 blocks after a last-minute catering gig went sideways. "Ma'am, I have your order," she said, trying to balance politeness and urgency. "Double espresso, no sugar, and a caramel latte with oat milk." The woman in the red dress turned slowly. Every inch of her screamed money. The sharp collarbone, the sharper tone. "You said no caramel," she hissed. "Does that sound like caramel-free to you?" Alice blinked. "The ticket said caramel. I could remake it, no charge." The woman stepped closer. Her stilettos clicked like accusation. "You think I need charity? Look at you. You shouldn't even be here. You're... whatever this is." She gestured at Alice's shoes. "People like you don't belong on sidewalks like this. You belong behind dumpsters, or in some greasy corner bakery where no one can smell your perfume. Oh wait, you don't have any." Alice's ears rang, her throat tightened. This wasn't about the latte. It was about class, about being the girl with too many receipts in her apron pocket and not enough armor. "I'm just doing my job," she managed. The woman scoffed. "And failing at it, pathetic. What would your boss say?" And then, I knew he'd say this conversation is about to cost you more than a latte. The woman turned. Thomas Fischer stood there, hands in his pockets, tailored coat unbuttoned, expression icy calm. Alice's heart stuttered. He was supposed to be in his office, at home. The woman blinked. "Excuse me, who are you?" Thomas took a step forward. "Thomas Fischer, CEO of Fischer Corp." A pause. "And the person who signed the investment checks for your firm, Mrs. Merritt." Color drained from the woman's face. I didn't realize." "You care to ask?" he interrupted, his voice cold but controlled. "And for the record, I tend to invest in people who treat others like human beings, not speed bumps." Mrs. Merritt fumbled for a response, but Thomas's gaze dismissed her before she could offer one. Alice stared at him, stunned, embarrassed, grateful, mostly confused. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's walk." He followed him numb down the street. Neither spoke until they turned the corner, away from the staring eyes. "I didn't expect to see you," she said softly. "It was in the building. I saw you from the window." He nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you for stepping in." "Don't thank me," he replied. "It was instinct. I hate arrogance, especially when it's punching down." Alice looked at him, really looked, and saw it not just the CEO but the man who hadn't smiled in years, who barely spoke but somehow saw everything. "You okay?" he asked. He tried to say yes, but it cracked in her throat. "I've heard things like that before," she admitted, "but not so publicly. It's usually more polite. The looks. You're my stock. You shouldn't have to get used to it." She gave a half laugh. "Maybe not, but I did. Rent's rent. Muffins don't bake themselves." He was quiet for a beat. "Then you held your ground." He was shaking. He stopped. Their eyes met, and for a flicker of a second the noise of the city faded. Then she grinned because humor was the only shield she had left. "And here I thought you only criticized muffins." He shook his head, but a hint of a smile touched his lips. He would remember to Jacques Ritzy. No promise. Back home, Alice told Grandma everything. While Alou said after a long pause, "Either he's falling for you or he's scared of your croissants." Grandma, "Just saying, that kind of man doesn't step outside unless he wants to be seen doing." Alice rolled her eyes, but her heart skipped once, maybe twice. The next morning she arrived at Fischer Corp with the usual tray, but instead of a note on the muffin, she'd written it on the napkin under the coffee cup. "Thanks for the classy rescue. I owe you a non-burnt pastry." Thomas didn't say anything, but when she came back that afternoon, the napkin was still on the tray, untouched, carefully folded. Chapter 5. The Woman Who Wasn't Welcome. Alice Oliver never liked formal wear. Dresses made her itchy. Heels gave her anxiety. But that night, as she arranged tiny macarons onto gold trays in a hall that shimmered like a jewelry box, she told herself she belonged here. She had every reason to. Fisher Corp had hired her bakery. She was delivering a service. She even triple-checked the flavor tags: lavender lemon, hazelnut truffle, and raspberry hope. And still she felt like an imposter. Soft jazz played over crystal chandeliers. The floors were polished enough to reflect self-doubt. And the guests? They didn't even see her, just the tray in her hands. He tried to ignore it, until the speaker took the stage. "Please welcome the host of tonight's event, Tom." Alice froze. Her fingers curled around the silver tongs. She turned slowly, and there he was. Suit impeccable, posture unreadable, words clipped but sincere. He wasn't prepared for how much that would sting. She had convinced herself he wouldn't be here. Now he was center stage, confident, composed. He was the hired help with flour under her nails. She retreated behind the dessert table, heart pounding, fingers trembling over candied garnishes. Then a voice slithered beside her. "I thought it was you." Alice turned. An elegant woman stood there in pearls and a blazer that probably cost more than Alice's monthly rent. Her hair was swept into a bun so tight it looked weaponized. Alice gave a polite nod. "Good evening." "You're the woman who hit my son's car," the woman said, tone clipped. "And now bring him coffee every morning." Alice blinked. "You're his mother." Maylin Fischer. The name fit too well. All syllabics, and I see. Alice straightened slightly. "Well, it was an accident. And the coffee thing, it's part of a friendly deal." Millie's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Let me be clear. Don't think you've been invited in." "Not trying to be," Glutter replied quietly. "My sweetheart," Malene said softly, "you don't need to try. You're already trying, with that dress, that smile, that hopeful little way you look at him." Alice's jaw tightened. "I'm here to work." Melinda tilted her head. "That's the first true thing you've said." Alice glanced down at her hands, powdered sugar still dusting her knuckles. She forced herself to breathe. Then Malene stepped closer. Her voice lowered. "You don't belong in his world, no matter how many muffins you bake." Alice met her eyes. "I said softly but firmly, but I still offered you macarons." For a second, just one, Malia looked surprised. Then she stepped back, gave a tight smile, and walked away. Alice stood there for a long moment, heart pounding like it was trying to claw out of her chest. 15 minutes later, she slipped into the service hallway to catch her breath. The desserts were fine, the trays were set. No one would miss her for a minute. She leaned against the cool wall and stared at the floor, trying not to cry. Not here, not in borrowed heels. A familiar voice broke through her spiral. "She talked to you, didn't she?" Alice turned. Thomas stood there, tie-loosened expression unreadable but eyes full of something almost like regret. "She made it clear," Alice said. So, no, she no. He hesitated. "I didn't think she'd come after you. Not like that." Alice laughed, a hollow sound. "She called me hopeful, like it's an insult." "She doesn't understand hope," he said. "She understands legacy." "And I'm not legacy," Alice murmured. "I'm a footnote." "No," he said, suddenly sharper. "You're the part people skip to. The unexpected." She crossed her arms. "Look, I liked you, but I also like my peace, and your mother doesn't go well with that." His jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. She exhaled. "I'll finish the table, then I'll leave quietly." He took a step forward. "Alice, don't worry," she said, trying to smile. "I won't stain Fisher Corp's reputation with cupcake frosting." He didn't stop her as she walked away. But he didn't look away either. Later that night, Alice sat with her grandma on their couch in Queens, still in the dress, shoes off, mascara smudged. "She told me I didn't belong," she whispered. Marlene paused mid, and she meant it. People like her always mean. but meaning it doesn't make it true. Alice looked down. I don't know if I'm brave enough for his world. Her grandma leaned forward. Then don't go into his world. Bring him into yours. If he won't step through your door without flinching, he's not worth opening it for. Alice didn't reply, but she held that sentence in her chest the rest of the night, like a match she hadn't struck yet. Chapter 6. The Muffin That Meant More. The morning after the gala, Alice didn't want to get out of bed. Her phone alarm buzzed like a mosquito near her ear. She smacked it off and stared at the ceiling, her heart still raw from the things Thomas's mother had said. You don't belong. Those words had clung to her like smoke all night. She'd dreamt of glass ceilings, literal ones, shattering over her as she tried to frost cupcakes inside a boardroom. He'd woken up with flour in her hair. But by 6:30 a.m. he was back in the kitchen, pouring mocha into a paper cup with shaky hands. Not because she forgave him, but because the deal still stood, and so did she. At 7:25 she left the house. The Fisher Corp lobby was unusually quiet. The security guard nodded, less gruff than usual. Morning, sugar girl, he muttered. You're all. Alice gave a weak smile. Maybe I'm just stubborn. He shrugged. But better than scared. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, like it was carrying more than just her and a tray. It carried everything unsaid between her and Thomas since that night. At the 32nd floor, Becky gave her a once-over and said, He's in, just be prepared. He's not exactly sunshine this morning. Alice nodded. Neither am I. He walked into the office, set the tray down without a word. Thomas was there, no tie today, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled. He looked up, but not immediately. When he did, it was careful. You're here, he said. I keep my word, she replied. He looked at the cup, then at the muffin. She hadn't left a note this time. Instead, she said, It's blueberry today, with lemon zest, for emotional balance. He didn't answer right away, just picked up the muffin, turned it slowly in his fingers. I read somewhere, he said, that lemon zest boosts serotonin. It also burns like hell if you get it in a paper cut, she replied. A small, almost invisible curve touched his lips. Silence settled. Then she asked quietly, So, are we pretending none of it happened? Tommy put down the muffin. He nodded slowly. Because I can, if that's easier for you. He leaned back in his chair, eyes tired. I don't want easy, he said. I want honest. He raised an eyebrow. Then why didn't you stop her? A beat? Und then He froze, he admitted. I haven't done that in years. Alice blinked. It was the most human thing he'd ever said. I wanted to protect you, he added, but I also wanted to see if you'd protect yourself. And you did. It's not romantic, she said softly. That's survival. He nodded. I know it. He picked up the tray. Next time, maybe just hand her a muffin and tell her to eat her own bitterness. This time he actually smiled. That night, back in Queens, Grandma Marlene asked, Did he say sorry? Alice shook her head. He said. He froze. Same thing if it came from the right place, Grandma muttered, handing her a slice of cornbread. Camila called later and asked, So, what now, you done with him? Alice stared at the ceiling. I don't know. He asked for another muffin tomorrow. Does that mean something? If he asks for a cheese roll, Camila said dryly, marry him. The next morning Alice showed up with the usual, but this time on top of the muffin, she placed a note that simply read, Stood here. Yamus looked at it for a long time. Then, without saying a word, he picked up his pen and scribbled a reply on the napkin. He slid it back to her before she left. He waited until she was in the elevator to read it. D'Abaton 7. Director of Second Chances. Alice didn't expect much from Monday. He expected muffins. He expected signing. He expected Thomas Fischer to drink his coffee without saying anything meaningful, because that was their... What she didn't expect. Becky met her at the elevator with a clipboard and a smirk. He wants you in the conference room after the delivery. Alice blinked. Conference? Becky nodded, and he told me to tell you verbatim. Bring the tray and your Alice stared. That's either a compliment or a trap. Probably both. But when she entered Thomas's office that morning, she found him already standing, suit jacket off, tie nowhere in sight. I need 10 minutes of your time, he said. You already get 35 every weekday. He didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth tugged. This is different. He gestured to the door. Follow me. The Fisher Corp conference room was a thing of glass and intimidation. Chrome chairs, a long black table that could seat a board of emotionless billionaires, screens flickering with numbers and graphics. Alice walked in carrying the tray like it was a peace offering. Go not toward the seat beside him. Sit. She did, carefully. He pulled up a file on the touchscreen panel and turned it toward her. At the top of the document, the Fisher Foundation Initiative, Empowerment Through Entrepreneurship. Underneath, a subheading, Recreational Recommendation, Alice Oliva. Alice blinked. Wait, what is this? A new foundation we're launching, he said, focused on supporting women who faced financial adversity but kept their businesses afloat. Microloans, mentorship, resources. You'd lead. She gaped at him. Me? You, he repeated, voice steady. Not just because of the cupcakes, because you've done more with less than most people with everything. She looked down at her apron, her hands. I'm not qualified. You are, he said. You've lived. I don't have a degree. You have receipts, he countered. And you've turned flour and fear into something people trust. You know how to stretch a dollar. You've kept your promise to me every morning, even when you were hurting. She swallowed. Thomas, this is a lot. He nodded. It is. And I don't expect an answer right now. Silence stretched between them. Then he added more quietly. I've watched you hold the world together with a paper cup and a smile. I think it's time the world saw what you can really do. Back home, Alice sat on the fire escape with her grandmother, sipping lukewarm tea. He offered me a director role, she said finally. Marlene didn't react, just stared out at the laundry line swinging in the evening breeze. Well, she said eventually, some people see your hands and think service. Other people see your hands and think strength. Sounds like he's the second kind. Alice looked down at her palms. Alice, steady. Do you think I could really do it? I think you already are, Marlene said. The next morning, Alice showed up at 7:30. Thomas was waiting. He placed the tray on his desk, coffee, croissants, and a muffin with no note this time. Instead, she pulled out it. What's this? He asked. My answer, she said. He opened it. Inside were 3 pages. Her ideas for the foundation, partnerships with community kitchens, a schedule of rotating workshops, a mentorship program tied to local colleges. At the bottom, she'd written, I don't want a handout. I want to build something, and I want to build it right. Thomas looked up. His voice was quiet. So that's a yes? It's a yes, she said, but you don't get to micromanage the muffin schedule anymore. His mouth twitched. Then he paused. And Alice. Thank you. He blinked. For what? For choosing more. For not letting my mother or my silence make you smaller. She shrugged. You offered me a seat at the table. I'm just making sure it doesn't come without a fork. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then, slow, he reached for the muffin. Chapter 8. The Investigation. For 2 weeks, the office air changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, but the temperature between Alice and Thomas was. He still rarely smiled. She still left sticky notes on muffins. But now there were meetings. Real ones. Strategy sessions. Budget drafts. Brainstorm boards that took over half the conference room wall. He gave her a title. She gave him purpose. And for a while that was enough. Until it wasn't. It started small. Becky handed Alice a folder by mistake, one that wasn't meant for her. Inside, internal memos, background briefs, employee vetting documents. And then, her name, Alice Oliva. Her address, her cupcake stand license, financial summaries, a list of her overdue utility bills dating back a year. A fire meter. He stared at it for a long time. He walked into his office without knocking. Thomas looked up from his desk, surprised. "Alice?" He placed the folder on the table between them. "You had me investigated." His fingers curled slowly away from the keyboard. "I did." No denial, no stammer. He nodded, absorbing that. "Why?" "I needed to know who you were, before I handed over a foundation with my name on it. I needed to know or control it." "I didn't." Alice stepped back. "So what else do you know? That I missed 2 rent payments during the pandemic? That I sold my mom's engagement ring to pay for a new coffee grinder? That I lied to the bank about my cart being a mobile catering unit?" "Yes," he said quietly. Her jaw clenched. "And you still asked me to lead it." He stood then, slowly. "I read everything," he said, "and all it did was confirm what I already suspected." "But I'm a medic." "No," he said firmly. "That you're stronger than anyone I've ever hired." She shook her head. "That's not how it feels. It feels like I was a test you graded behind my back." He almost took a step closer. "Oh, no," she said, stepping back. "I get it. You're a CEO. You don't move without data. But I'm not a spreadsheet. I'm a person, and you don't get to read my life like it's a case file." Silence filled the space between them. Finally he spoke. "You're right. I was afraid. Of me. Of trusting the wrong person. Of giving something important to someone who might not stay." He stared at him. "Then you should have just asked me." Alice left the building without picking up the tray. He walked all the way back to Queens, past the subway, past the bodegas, past the street that always smelled like engine grease and lilacs. She reached out her little stand and leaned on it like it was the only thing holding her up. Grandma Marlene came outside, wiping her hands on a towel. "You look like someone who got told a hard tooth," she said. "Got told a soft betrayal," Alice murmured. Marlene nodded. "Sometimes the quiet ones hurt worse." That night, Alice didn't bathe. She sat on the fire escape, knees to her chest, watching city lights flicker like stars that couldn't commit. He wasn't angry, not entirely. He was hurt. Because for all the walls she'd torn down, he'd kept his hyacinth intact. The next morning she almost didn't go. She stared at the clock, at the tray, at the note she'd already written but hadn't packed. Honesty shouldn't have to be requested. So she tore it up. Then she went anyway. "Go Muffin. There's coffee. And a single envelope." Thomas didn't say a word when she placed it on his desk. Inside, 3 lions. "I should be mad. But I'm also thankful for the fact that you still see me." He read it in silence. He turned to leave. At the door he spoke, voice low. "So will you stay?" Alice paused. "Not for you," she said. "For the women this foundation can reach. For my grandma. For that girl who cried into a tray of lemon cupcakes 5 years ago and told herself she was allowed to want more." He nodded once. "It's step at a time," he said. Alice glanced over her shoulder. "And let's get back to work." Chapter thought. Let them whisper. Whispers travel faster in glass buildings. By Monday morning, Alice could feel them long before she reached the 32nd floor. Glances over cappuccino cups, pauses when she walked into the elevator, the way the receptionist didn't say good morning for the first time in weeks. The Fisher Court board had found out. Not about the foundation. About her. The girl with the cupcake cart. The woman Thomas Fischer had asked to lead a multi-million-dollar social initiative. "They think I'm sleeping with you," Alice said bluntly as she stepped into Thomas's office. He didn't look up. "Of course they do. They think I'm your... What, charity project? PR stunt?" "They think you're a risk," he said, "because they don't understand anything they didn't manufacture." She exhaled. "And what are you doing about it?" "Letting them talk," he said, "and then letting you speak." Alice frowned. "Excuse me." He presented the foundation results today, to the board. He blinked. Alone? He nodded. They think they've figured you out. Let them underestimate you. Alice looked at him. And what if they don't listen? How do you know? Because I've been in that room for 10 years, he said. And I've never heard someone speak with your kind of truth. 2 hours later, Alice stood at the end of the Fisher Court boardroom table. 12 members, all polished, all skeptical. Behind them, projected charts, outreach data, video clips of women who'd been helped by the foundation. Alice adjusted the mic. Her palms were sweating. She could feel every inch of her borrowed blazer pinching her sides. But her voice stayed calm. This project didn't start in a boardroom, she began. It started with a cart, a late rent notice, and a girl who didn't know if tomorrow would come with power or eviction. Some board members shifted. And yet, she continued, we helped 62 women launch side businesses in the past 6 months. 24 now run sustainable income streams. 12 have hired others. 1 has her product in Whole Food. He paused, looked each member in the eye. You don't have to like how I got here, but I earned the right to stay. A silence. She finished. You want to review the budget, fine, but don't review me like I'm a line item. I'm a life. And so are they. When she walked out of the room, her hands were shaking. Camus was waiting in the hallway. You stayed quiet the whole time, she said. It was hard, he admitted. He handed him the flash drive. I said what needed to be said. He nodded, proud. You didn't flinch. You wanted to. But you did. They stood there a moment longer, in a hallway full of tension and possibility. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I'm not giving up this work. You won't have to, he said, and as of 20 minutes ago, it's official. You remain director, and I'm stepping back. He blinked. He smiled slightly. It's your name that matters now. That night, Alice walked into the apartment, still holding her shoes in one hand. Grandma Marlene looked up from the couch. Alice collapsed beside her. I told 12 billionaires that I wasn't going anywhere. Marlene raised her tea mug. Now that's the daughter I raised. You'd erase it. Marlene shrugged. Still feels like it. Alice leaned against her. He whispered, Grandma. Let them whisper, Marlene said. You just keep showing up. Later, Alice scrolled through her phone and saw a message from Thomas. You didn't need me in that room, but I've never been prouder to be in your world. He smiled. Looked back. We stay in it, but no more folders on my life. The typing bubble appeared. No more files, just faith.
Chapter 10. The Jacket and the Ring. Spring came to New York like an apology. Soft rain, slow warmth, flowers blooming in spite of the noise. Alice didn't know what day it was when Thomas stopped asking about the Muffin schedule. When the meetings blurred into laughter and laughter turned into silences that didn't ask to be filled. But she remembered the night he didn't take her to dinner, he brought dinner to the cart. A candle in a mason jar, 2 sandwiches, a paper bag that said, Market Research Grilled Cheese Edition. That was the first time she thought, I might love him. And it terrified her. One Thursday evening, he asked her to close early. No hints, he said when she pressed him. Just trust me. He picked her up in a car that wasn't sleek but familiar. She wore jeans. He wore the jacket she'd teased him about months ago, the one with the corduroy collar. They drove 2 hours north to a quiet clearing in the trees. A converted barn glowed under string lights. Inside, candles, cupcakes, and people she hadn't expected to see. Becky, her sister, Camila, even Grandma Marlene, in a navy-wrap dress and orthopedic heels. The foundation staff. Every woman Alice had helped. A table set for 2. A waiter in a bow tie who winked and said, Mrs. Fischer. Alice froze. Did he just... Foreshadowing, Thomas murmured. They ate, laughed, shared old jokes. And then, after dessert, he stood, pulled a small box from his jacket, and knelt on the wooden floor. Alice Olive, he said, voice steady. You hit my car, ruined my morning, and rearranged my entire life. You showed me that some messes are blessings. That strength doesn't shout, it shows up at 7:30 IE with coffee and grace. He opened the box. It was a ring with a tiny blue stone, the color of the dress she wore at the gala. "Will you marry me?" he said. "Not to fix you, not to save you, but to walk beside you, even when the coffee's cold and the muffins fall." She laughed through tears. "That was the worst proposal I've ever heard." "So that's a no?" "It's a yes." They kissed. Cameras clicked. Becky cried louder than everyone. In the corner, Grandma whispered, "About damn time." The wedding was quiet. The garden behind a community center in Queens. Folding chairs, wildflowers, no brands, no champagne walls. Guests threw coffee beans instead of rice. Camila made the playlist. Becky officiated, barely making it through her notes. When Thomas said, "You gave me something my world never did," permission to be real, even Grandma teared up. And when Alice said, "You saw me before I believed I was worth seeing," the whole room went still. After the vows, they danced under a tarp of stars. No stage, no DJ, just music from an old speaker and shoes kicked off in the grass. Later that night, back at home, Alice placed the ring beside a paper note that read, "First delivery, 1 double mocha, 1 broken routine, 1 life changed." She slipped into bed beside the man who used to be a client, a stranger, a guarded executive behind a desk. Now he was hers, and she was his. Not because of muffins, but because, in a world that rarely offers second chances, they gave each other one anyway, how it always was meant to end. They still talk about that day, the crash, the frosting, the girl who dented a Jaguar and somehow walked away with a future. But Alice Oliver knows the truth. She didn't walk away with anything. She built it, one coffee at a time, one step at a time, one scar, one laugh, one silent elevator ride. Love didn't arrive all at once for her. It wasn't fireworks or a fairy tale. It was steady, awkward, real, and it came with apology muffins and sticky notes instead of grand declarations. Thomas Fischer never planned to fall, but somewhere between sarcasm and sincerity, he realized he didn't want a perfect life. He wanted a life with her. Because love isn't the moment someone sees you dressed up under chandelier light. It's the moment they notice your bandaged fingers, your fraying apron, your tired smile. And they stay. They stay anyway. Now, they're still learning. The foundation thrives. Alice doesn't run a cart anymore. She runs a program with real power, real impact. But she still bakes. And every morning, Thomas still asks for one thing that never changed. Blueberry muffin and that smile. If you've ever been told you don't belong, if you've ever felt too small, too loud, too late, or too lost, let this be your reminder. Your worth isn't measured by titles or bank accounts. It's measured by the way you keep showing up, even when the world tells you not to. Especially then, sometimes the people with the softest voices make the biggest changes. Sometimes the girl who shows up with a tray walks away with a legacy. And sometimes what begins as an accident was always the beginning of a love story. If this story reminded you of a moment you almost gave up, or a person who made you believe again, share it in the comments. Someone else might need to read it tonight. Not for views, not for clicks, but because truth, like love, is meant to be passed on. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the smallest kindness is the thing that changes someone's entire direction, even if it comes wrapped in parchment and sugar.